Right, so I wasn't brought up in a Christian home, and so I had no knowledge really of God except for RE lessons. I do remember my mum once saying to me, you ought to pray, and I said to her, why? And she said, well, like, just in case there is a God. I thought, well, that's not really a very good reason to pray, so I knocked that on the head. But I just remember, like, things, if somebody came to the door wanting to talk about God, like Mormons or JWs or something like that, my mum would always say, oh, tell them I'm busy, I'm cooking or something like that. So we were encouraged really not to have anything to do with it. I remember once going to church when I was a child, but because I lived in Wales, it was all in Welsh, so I didn't understand anything that was being said. But actually worse than that was that the people didn't speak to us at all. Me and my sister, we walked in and we walked out and nobody said hello to us, so I kind of just got the feeling that it wasn't for me. And my father had left when I was 9, and that had quite a profound effect on me, although I didn't realise it at the time, but it kind of had the effect of hardening my heart quite a lot, really. Anyway, I ended up in the position where I honestly believed there was no such thing as God, and I felt I was a very hardened atheist, and if anybody ever tried to talk to me about God, I would get very angry, very hostile. I wasn't a very pleasant person in those days, far from it. And I felt that people who believed in God were very weak, slightly pathetic, that they were deluded. How could they believe in something that they couldn't touch and feel? That was ridiculous. And I had a real contempt, I think, for people who believed in God. I'd gone to live in a hostel in London. I was very, very fortunate because it was in South Kensington, which is a really posh area of London. I wouldn't have been able to live there otherwise. Beautiful room. They had a chapel downstairs, and actually it was the Girls' Friendly Society. This is an old Victorian organisation that used to have hostels for waifs and strays. And so there were people there who would pray in the chapel downstairs. Now, I wanted nothing to do with this, of course, because I didn't believe in God and wanted nothing to do with it. But I do remember one day coming back from work, and there was a lady that led the organisation called Dame Kettlewell. And I was very impressed because she was a dame, so I thought she was very important. And the warden came to me and she said, Dame Kettlewell prayed for you this morning. And I was stunned into silence, and I said, why? And she said, because I've told her how helpful you are to me. You come and help and do the beds and cleaning and things like that. And she was really impressed and wanted to pray for you. And I remember being completely poleaxed by this. And I couldn't speak to the warden. And I ran upstairs and I threw myself on the bed in true dramatic fashion. And I sobbed my heart out because I couldn't believe that anyone would want to pray for me. I thought, if they really knew what I was like deep inside, there's no way they would want to pray for me. By all means, pray for starving children and important things like that in the world, but to pray for me, and I remember having that had a very profound effect on me. I remember a girl asking me to go and see an Indian guru, and I was quite impressed with this actually, because I thought, they do meditation, and they were kind of linked to the Beatles, because we're going back to the 70s now when this happened. So there was kind of some kudos, and it was all filmed by the BBC. It was a big thing. He was coming over to the south, and I thought, oh yeah, I'll go along to see this guy, because you know I need some peace, and maybe meditation would be a good thing. So went to this guy, and very open to what might happen. And some weird stuff happened, but nothing really happened for me. But in the afternoon, he started to talk about meditation. So now he had my attention. I thought, okay, right, meditation. This is what I need to experience a peace inside, because I didn't feel peaceful. And he said, what you need to do is find a place where you can be nice and quiet by yourself. I thought, oh, that's really good. And then he said, maybe you would have some cushions on the floor. And I thought, oh yeah, that's fine. And perhaps some candles for atmosphere. And I thought, yeah, I love candles, so I'm going along very nicely with this. And then he unfurled a picture of himself. And as he did so, my the shutters came down, and I just thought, no, I cannot worship you. You are just a man, just like me. You are just like me. And I will not worship just a mere man. Remember, my father had left, and that had left a lot of woundedness as well. So I was definitely not going to worship just a mere man. And I just remember having the thought at that time, if I was ever going to worship somebody, it would have to be somebody out of this world. I just remember having that conscious thought. And as I left that place, there was a kind of disappointment in me, really, that nothing had happened. But as we did, and I was walking to, we were walking to the station, me and my friend, God spoke to me. And it felt like when God spoke to me that he had boomed right across the world. And I felt like the earth shook on its foundations because it was such a loud boom. And I looked at my friend and I grabbed her arm and I said, "Did you hear that?" And she looked at me and she said, "Hear what?" And I thought, oh my goodness, he's just spoken to me. And I felt like I had been hit by a train. I just felt absolutely shaken to the core that God had just spoken to me. And my friend hadn't even heard it, which I was dumbfounded with. And I just started to bubble with an excitement that the fact that God himself had just spoken to me. And I thought, how amazing that 1 second before he'd spoken to me, I would have died saying, there's no God. I would have gone to my death saying that with full confidence. And then 1 second later, I would have died saying, there's absolutely a God. There is a God, and he's just spoken to me. And I couldn't shut up all the way back to our home. I could not shut up about this thing. I must have driven this poor woman absolutely bonkers. And I realised, or I found out, that my mum, who lived in Chester, had had a visit for some people talking about Jesus, and she'd had a similar experience. So I was in London on this Saturday, and God had spoken to me. She was in Chester, and God had spoken to her. So I marvelled at that. How amazing is that? But she went out and bought a Bible. And I had no compelling at all to go out and buy a Bible. And she bought a Bible, and then she started buying books about people who had had these amazing experiences with God, where their lives had been transformed. Testimony books. And she started sending them to me. People like Corrie ten Boom and Gladys Aylward and David Wilkerson, possibly names you wouldn't know, but profound changes. And I began to see that this Jesus had met with these people. And at this point, I started to retreat. And I thought, oh, I don't really need Jesus. I've met God. He's spoken to me. I have no doubt that he is alive. But this Jesus, no, I don't really need Jesus. And so I just started to back off a little bit. But I still fed on these books. They were so exciting. People's lives had truly been churned around. Addictions had been broken and all sorts of things. But you know, God's got a real sense of humour. God is so amazing, because he wasn't willing to let me go at that point. And he placed me in a room with this girl who evoked every tender feeling in my heart, but she irritated the life out of me. And I was pretty awful to her. I'm deeply ashamed of the way I was, but I was pretty horrible to her. And yet everything towards, a loving response was invoked in me, because she was an orphan, she lived with her grandparents, she had nobody in her life that loved her, she had no brothers or sisters, and she was very lonely, she had very few friends, well, she didn't have any friends, to be fair. And so I would feel gushy towards her, but then she would open her mouth and I would just feel irritated. And I had this little truce. I said, right, God, I'm going to be really nice to her for a whole week. I'm going to be so nice to her that she's going to be begging me to stop. And I couldn't manage it. And I couldn't manage it. And I thought, that's rubbish. And I would just be horrible to her. because in those days I had a very foul mouth, and I could be very cutting and very, very nasty to people. And I was to her. And then I'd feel terrible because this poor girl had nobody, and here I was adding to it. So I remember this one night, I went to bed and I said, right, God, right, one whole day I'm going to be so nice to her. And I got up that morning and I went to the sink and I started to clean my teeth. She woke up and she said something. And I threw my toothbrush into the sink. I came out with a stream of obscenities towards her. And I realised, actually, that I couldn't change myself. As much as I wanted to be a really loving person, and I wanted to get rid of all the foulness in me, I recognised I couldn't do it. I couldn't even do it for 1 minute. I was very optimistic. I thought I could do it for a week. Very optimistic. I thought I could do it for a day. I couldn't actually do it for a minute, and that was the reality, and that was the condition of my heart. And so it wasn't very long afterwards that I came to a point where I knelt down by my bed, because I thought that's how you had to talk to God. I thought you had to kneel down and you had to do this, because I didn't know. But I did. And I just said, Jesus, I really kind of hope you're real, because if you're not real, then I am up a creek and I actually don't want to live. So I prayed this prayer, hoping that he was real, asking him to forgive me for all the things that I'd done and the foul ways that I'd portrayed, and asking him to come and clean my life up, really. Now, I prayed this very sincere prayer, and I didn't know whether I was talking to the ceiling. In spite of the experience I'd had about God, I really didn't know whether this Jesus was real. And I kind of expected some sort of thunderbolt at this point, because I'd had this experience with God, and it didn't happen. And I went to bed, and I thought, okay, I went to bed. But I woke up really early the next morning at 6 o'clock, which was unheard of because I like my bed. And I'm always a last minute person. And it was a Monday morning, and I hated Monday mornings. But I woke up at 6 o'clock and I thought, I slept like a baby that night before. And I woke up really excited, and I thought, why am I excited? I don't know. Went in the shower, was singing at 7 o'clock in the morning. What? I don't usually do that. Singing away. And I thought, what? I could feel this bubbling up. And I thought, this is mad. What's going on? And I thought, I'm going to win the pools, which, if you don't know, is a bit like the lottery. But I didn't do the pools. I thought, well, I'm not going to win the pools because I don't do the pools, so I'm not going to win that. What is going on? And I was getting ready, and I got to the front door, and I opened the front door. And this sounds like I'm on speed or something, because I looked outside, and there was just the normal stream of traffic in the middle of London, people bumper to bumper looking really, really miserable because it's a Monday morning. And I thought, oh, somebody's washed the world. Somebody's washed the world, because the trees look greener and the sky looks bluer and it looks amazing. And I thought, that is so weird. And then I spotted this guy in the car, and I thought, oh, you look so beautiful. And he was like this, really miserable, but I thought, you look so beautiful. And I wanted to run up to the car, and I wanted to open the door, and I wanted to hug him and say, you look so beautiful. And I didn't, thankfully. And I went round the corner, and I went to my newsagents, and I got my cigarettes and my newspaper, which was my normal routine in the morning. And he looked at me and he says, are you all right? And I said, yeah. I said, I don't know what's happened. And it was only when I got outside and I suddenly realised the prayer that I prayed the night before. And I just realised this Jesus that I didn't know if he was really there, and I didn't really know if he would answer, had come into my life. And I just thought, wow, you heard me and you're there. And I felt like I'd come home, and I felt absolutely like before I was half a person, and I didn't know that I was only half a person. And now I was whole, and I'd come home. Well, I tell you what, that bubbling then just absolutely, it was like, you know, a geyser, you see, that just suddenly shoots up. And I thought, do you know what? I don't need the tube this morning to go to work, because I could float to work. I was just on an indescribable high. I knew that I'd been forgiven. The burdens of being a horrid, foul person and all my sin and wrongdoing was just lifted off my shoulders. I felt deliriously happy, and I'd never felt that ever in my life before. And I've experienced some lovely things. I've experienced the wonder of having 3 children who I love and adore, and those are pretty awesome occurrences. But nothing will ever touch the moment that Jesus made himself real to me. And I'm not saying or suggesting in any way that the last 35 years have been easy. There have been some horrible things and difficult things and dark days and really, really difficult times. But Jesus has kept me. My testimony of that day is as real as when it happened when I was 20. And actually, I think it's even more powerful to me because he's kept me for those 35 years. I now have an experience of Christ for the past 35 years. And he's no less real. In fact, he's more real than ever before. And I couldn't shut up. I had to tell anybody and everybody who would give me 2 seconds of their time about this amazing thing that had happened in my life. And the very thing that I'd asked for, please make me a loving person, God absolutely did that. And I think it's true today. If anybody was to say anything about me, they would say that Crystal's quite a loving person. And God did that. Jesus changed my heart from a hard, cold, wicked, horrible heart into a lovely, beautiful, compassionate heart. And he did that. It was miraculous, and it continues to be miraculous.